Hello Cogitantes! It's been a whole month since the dust finally settled on the pugnacious showdown between the Western journalistic clergy and the chanting bards of X. Yeah, that was a ride. But now that the battlefield is clear, we can finally have a chill but critical chat about what really matters in Black Myth Wukong. And the first question is, who's the monkey? I know, there are already a ton of lore videos and articles on Black Myth Wukong. And trust me, the literature on its source, Journey to the West, is massive. But here's the thing that really caught my attention. Almost nobody talks about Journey to the West as a philosophical text, which, let's be honest, is a little weird. I mean, both the game and the book are packed with allegory, cultural and religious imagery, stuff that medieval philosophers would have absolutely loved. And what's cool is that the game, being a modern interpretation, blends all these different traditions to appeal to a global audience. It's balancing Chinese and Western worldviews, kind of like juggling fireballs. Which is why it took me a while to dive into this new series. Allegory is key here. Much like religion, allegory has been used for centuries to convey complex ideas in a more digestible way. Think of it as the Spotify playlist for ancient thought, Greek myths, philosophical tales, or that classic blend of philosophy and religion you find in Islamic and Jewish traditions. In Chinese thought, allegory often takes a more spiritual and process-oriented approach, like Taoism's emphasis on harmony with the Tao or Buddhism's path toward enlightenment. So here's the plan. I'm going to break down Black Myth Wukong as a collection of allegories that don't just tie into Journey to the West, they reach out and give a friendly wave to Western literature too. Whether you call it a continuation, an adaptation, or something in between, there's a lot to unpack here. Now, about my method. I'll be looking at Black Myth Wukong through a Western philosophical lens. Trying to figure out how we, as Westerners, experience a game that's bursting with Chinese cultural and philosophical elements. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hold up, isn't that a bit Orientalist? Well, shout out to Edward Said, you've got a point. Here's the deal. I'm not here to slap an Eastern text into a Western framework and call it a day. It's super tempting to do that, right? But the allegorical nature of medieval Western philosophy often worked to reconcile faith and reason, like in Dante's Divine Comedy or Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. In contrast, Journey to the West is weaving spiritual self-cultivation and moral principles into a completely different metaphysical context. So yeah, it's not a perfect fit. My goal? To avoid the whole Orientalist trap while exploring how Western frameworks can actually help make this game more accessible to a Western audience, without, of course, losing what makes Taoism, Confucianism, or Buddhism so special in the first place. Now back to the question. Who is the monkey? The monkey's character arc can basically be broken down into three big themes: rebellion, immortality, and sensory attachment. Sounds simple? Oh, trust me, it's about to get deep, but we will take it step by step, like peeling an immortal peach. Alright, let's dive into the first theme, rebellion against authority, and trust me, Wukong doesn't hold back. If there is one thing he hates, it's being told what to do. This rebellious streak? Not surprising at all. The original novel, Journey to the West, can be read as an allegory for government control versus personal freedom. Wu Chenghen, the author, was not a fan of the Ming dynasty's officialdom. He had some serious disillusionment going on there. Sound familiar? Yeah, Wukong is basically sticking it to the man, or rather, to the gods. In the prologue of the game, we see Wukong going head-to-head with the Celestial Army, which is straight out of chapters 4 to 6 of the book. Now pay attention to this part because Wukong isn't just fighting some random deities. Oh no, he's talking to the 4 heavenly kings and Zhu Lingshen, big shots in Buddhist and Chinese mythology. These guys are the protectors of the world, guardians of the 4 cardinal directions. Imagine if your GPS had gods instead of satellites. Yeah, they're that important. Each of these kings embodies a form of cosmic power. We've got the long-eyed celestial king, symbolizing vision and insight, or the broad knowledge celestial king, who, you guessed it, represents wisdom. But here's the kicker. Even with all that divine power, Wukong is like, meh, not impressed. Then there's Juling Shen. His name translates to the mighty spirit god, or giant spirit god. Sounds pretty intimidating, right? Well, not to Wukong. Juling Shen is this massive deity known for his size and strength. So what's Wukong's really rebelling against here? It's not just about breaking rules for the sake of it. This is a deep existential rebellion. Wukong's real beef is with the entire structure of heaven. The celestial deities, the so-called immortal beings, are shown to be dependent on spiritual energy harvested from the mortal realm. Basically, they are feeding off the very beings they claim to protect. Wukong's line, immortality for that word, all realms and beings have ruined themselves, is a mic drop moment. It exposes the hypocrisy of the celestial order, where power is sustained through exploitation. So Wukong's rebellion isn't just about breaking free from the rules, it's a condemnation of the entire system. He's like, nah, this whole cosmic hierarchy is a scam, and I'm not playing along. And what happens? Wukong defeats Juling Shen, and by doing so, he reveals that this seemingly indestructible celestial hierarchy is actually full of cracks. It's flawed morally because it exploits the mortal realm, and practically because it can't contain Wukong's defiance. Now, here's where things get a little weird. In the book, Wukong's journey ends with him finding enlightenment and accepting the title of Buddha victorious in strife. This symbolizes that he is finally at peace, in harmony with the cosmic order. But then the game just says, no, we are not doing that, and throws that entire journey out of the window right at the beginning. So why does the game reject this whole Wukong finds inner peace thing? Well, there are 2 possible explanations. First up, divine retribution, a concept found in Taoist thought, specifically in the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism. The basic idea here is that the gods don't really like it when mortals try to level up their knowledge or power. Classic example, Prometheus. You know, the guy who saw human freezing in the cold and thought, well, that's not cool, and stole fire from the gods to give humanity a little warmth and hope. And what happens? Zeus goes, now you don't, and punishes him for eternity. Wukong, he's pulling the same stunt. He defies the heavens, trying to reclaim his freedom from their control. And just like Prometheus, he gets punished for his rebellion. But here's where things get interesting. The punishment in Greek mythology comes from gods who are anthropomorphic, so they have personal motives, egos, and power trips. In Taoism, however, divine punishment isn't so personal. The universe itself rebalances. Think of it as cosmic karma. The gods don't throw a fit out of ego. It's just that your actions disrupt the harmony, so you've got to face the consequences. The second explanation, this one ties into the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, or non-action. Stay with me, this doesn't mean doing nothing. Wu Wei is about going with the flow of the universe, acting in harmony with the natural order instead of forcing your will. Wukong's desire for autonomy, his need to be free and do his own thing, could be seen as the opposite of this Taoist ideal. He is rebelling against a cosmic order that values balance, and that makes him both a symbol of Taoist naturalism and a chaotic force that violates it. It's an existential assertion of freedom in a world where the gods are the gatekeepers of an oppressive, arbitrary system. And Wukong is having none of it. At one point in the game he says, "Good, I am entertained. Speaking of entertainment, wouldn't it be fun if I pluck your extra eye out for my snack and allow you to keep the other 2? Yep, You heard that right. Wukong's trash-talking Erlang Shen, one of the most powerful warriors deities in Chinese mythology. Erlang Shen is famous for his third eye, which gives him the ability to see through illusions and deceptions. It's the source of his power, his strength in battle, and his key to discerning the truth. But Wukong doesn't care. He mocks him, challenging the very idea that this divine insight makes him superior. Now, Erlang Shen gives Wukong an interesting offer. Bend the knee, return to the Celestial Court. It's like saying, hey buddy, just fall back in line, play nice, and we'll call it even. And here's where the theme of authority versus autonomy really shines in Black Myth Wukong. Erlang Shen represents the privileges of the celestial elite. He's offering Wukong a chance to rejoin the same system that Wukong fought so hard to escape. But Wukong, he rejects it hard. This is a defining moment in his rebellion. He chooses personal freedom over subjugation, even if that means he's going to be locked in eternal conflict with the celestial powers. So Prometheus and Wukong, they're both rebels. Both reject the control of oppressive divine structures. Prometheus gives fire, knowledge, power to humanity, and Wukong, he is rejecting the gods' attempts to contain him. In both cases, they are fighting for autonomy, for the right to define their own fate, even against a seemingly all-powerful hierarchy. So we have covered why Wukong rebels, but now let's get inside his head. How does this rebellion actually work in the mind of the Monkey King? This is where we dive into Chinese cosmology. One of the few essays I came across that digs into this is by Michelle Zhang. She wrote a piece called A Hidden Theory of Mind in Journey to the West, where she presents Wukong as the embodiment of something called Xuan. What's Xuan? Think of Xuan as a mind faculty, a bridge between two states, the empty state and the mindful state. It's that creative intelligence that exists right in the middle, between pure emptiness, no thoughts, just blank space, and the structured, concept-driven state where your mind is forming ideas. Xuan gets its definition straight from the Taoist classic, the Tao Te Ching, chapter 1. And according to Zhang, it should be understood as a kind of mental tool or elixir that helps you navigate between these two worlds. What does that actually mean in Wukong's world? It's all about balance. Imagine this: when Wukong is driven by desire and fame, like when he calls himself the great sage equal to heaven, he is in that mindful state, acting within the world, caught up in concepts like power and control. But on the flip side, Xuan also represents the ability to connect to emptiness, to see things as they truly are, without the distractions of fame or ego pulling him down. Here's a simpler way to think about it. You're drawing. You've got a blank piece of paper in front of you. That's the empty state. No ideas yet, just potential. Then you decide to draw a house. Suddenly, you're thinking about shapes, colors, details. Your mind is now in the mindful state, using what you know to create something. That moment when you're in between, when your imagination is working but hasn't fully formed the idea yet, that's Xuan. Or picture yourself daydreaming. You're floating between reality and imagination, in that in-between zone where your thoughts haven't quite solidified into anything concrete. That's Xuan, where imagination meets reality. Philosophically, Xuan is the glue that helps us balance two key things: pure observation, seeing the world as it is, and conceptualization, how we explain or make sense of the world. Without it, we would either be struck just seeing the world without really understanding it, or lost in our thoughts without connecting to reality. Now, back to Wukong. In the game, we see him constantly oscillating between rebellion and enlightenment. This is the key. Even though he's reached enlightenment and taken the title of Buddha in the book, the game shows him rejecting that title, Why? Because Wukong is trapped between truth and illusion. At times, he can access moments of truth, connecting with the state of emptiness, where things are as they truly are. But his desires for fame, control, keep dragging him back into the world of concepts, where he has to fight, struggle, and rebel. That's why, even after becoming Buddha, he remains at odds with the celestial order. He's blocked, stuck between heaven and earth, between enlightenment and chaos. Wukong's enlightened intelligence defies both heavenly constraints and earthly limits. Now, let me throw this back to you. What would you have done in this place? Imagine you're offered total autonomy, you can do whatever you want, sounds great, right? But there's a catch. You're in eternal conflict with an omnipotent force. No matter what, you will always be watched, and sometimes you will be punished. So here's the question. Is true freedom the ability to act as you wish, even if it means constant struggle? Or does freedom mean living in harmony with a greater cosmic order? Would you, like Wukong, rebel against such a system, or would you seek to transcend it by aligning with its principles? And with that, let's move on to the next part of our analysis. Alright, let's dive into the second big theme, the burden of enlightenment and immortality. Wukong was made a Buddha once, right? But there is a problem. In the game, he seems to find the celestial rules a bit restrictive. You'll think that reaching enlightenment would be the endgame, a nice little bow on top of Wukong's journey. But no, he's like, thanks, but no thanks. Why? Because for Wukong, the responsibilities that come with enlightenment are just too much of a burden. He craves freedom over the weight of divine duties. Let's rewind a bit. In the prologue of Black Myth Wukong, we see Sun Wukong rocking his battle regalia, and this isn't just for show. The gear he's wearing includes items that symbolize two things, immortality and power. At one point, Wukong even drops the phrase Changsheng Bulao, which literally means long life without aging, classic Wukong. Immortality is something he's been chasing for ages. If you have read the book, you know that Journey to the West shows Wukong's endless quest for eternal life. He goes full on rogue, eating peaches of immortality, stealing elixirs. It's like he's raiding the heavens pantry, looking for anything that would make him unstoppable. This ties right back to the concept of Xuan we talked about earlier. Wukong's mind is constantly bouncing between the emptiness of truth and the desires that drive him to act. And in this case, those desires are all about escaping mortality. Now, in the game, the idea of immortality goes beyond just not dying. It's about power, status, and control. Wukong, for his rebellious nature, still craves immortality because it's his ticket to break him free from the control of heaven and fate. With eternal life, he is untouchable, or at least that's the idea. But there is a problem. The concept of immortality in Black Myth Wukong isn't the feel-good, ascendant version you would expect from Taoist self-cultivation or something like Plato's eternal soul. In the game, immortality is twisted. Instead of leading to higher spiritual enlightenment, it's sustained by something much darker, the exploitation of spiritual energy. Here's how it works. The celestial beings, the so-called immortals, are trapped in a system of endless consumption. They need to extract energy from the mortal realm just to keep themselves going. It's like they're stuck on a cosmic treadmill, constantly feeding off lower beings to maintain their status. This isn't the serene, eternal peace you might expect from the Taoist sages. This immortality is like a prison, where even the gods are dependent on the suffering and energy of others. And Wukong, he sees right through it. That's why he rejects his Buddha status. It's not just about wanting freedom, it's about refusing to be a part of this cosmic injustice. Wukong is not here to play along with the system that traps both mortals and gods in a cycle of exploitation. His rejection of enlightenment is his way of saying, If this is what being Buddha means, I'm out. Wukong's rejection of immortality is about exposing a corrupted system. Immortality in Black Myth Wukong is far from the spiritual ideal found in Taoist philosophy or Western ideas like Plato's eternal soul. In the game, immortality is a trap. Even the gods are stuck into it, endlessly consuming and never truly finding peace. Wukong's rebellion here isn't just physical, it's a philosophical rejection of the whole system. In Western philosophy, immortality is often seen as this deep desire to transcend human limits and, most importantly, escape death. Philosophers like Plato were all about the soul, arguing that it's eternal and carries on after we shuffle off this mortal coil. Plato believed that true immortality didn't come from living forever in a physical body, that's a lot of maintenance, but rather from living a life of virtue and seeking the eternal truths of the universe. So it's more of a spiritual immortality, where the soul is in sync with the ground truths of existence, than just, staying alive forever. Over in Chinese culture, we've got a different take on immortality. One key concept is Changsheng Bulao, which means eternal life without aging. It's about reaching a state of harmony with the universe. Immortality here is tied directly to achieving unity with the Tao, the Way, the natural order of all things. So if you align yourself with the Tao, you can transcend the usual birth-death-rebirth circle. In Taoism, immortality is seen as a non-permanent state. It's a bit of a balancing act. You need to keep consuming high-quality substances, elixirs, or practicing internal alchemy to prolong this state of being. It's like the universe saying, you want to stick around? Cool, but keep working at it. One of the most famous symbols of Taoist immortality is the elixir of immortality, something you will find referenced throughout Black Myth Wukong. Ancient alchemists were on a mission to perfect this elixir, believing that it could grant eternal life when done right. But again, immortality here isn't just physical, it's metaphysical. It's about reaching a state of inner peace, free from worldly desires, in perfect harmony with the Tao. And then there are the legendary Xian, immortal sages, who got it right. They achieved this harmony and now live in heavenly realms or on remote mountains, far beyond human suffering. Wukong's quest for immortality can be seen as an attempt to join this elite club, gaining freedom from both earthly and divine constraints. But there's more. There are three major philosophies in China: Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, and each one sees immortality a bit differently. We have already touched on Taoism, where immortality is all about spiritual harmony with the Tao. Confucianism, on the other hand, focuses more on moral immortality. It's not about living forever physically, but about leaving a lasting legacy. In this view, you achieve immortality by being remembered for your good deeds and the impact you had on society. It's a humanistic approach. What you do matters more than how long you live. What about Buddhism? It flips the whole idea of immortality on its head. In Buddhism, eternal life isn't the goal at all. It's actually something to avoid. The idea is to escape the cycle of samsara, the endless loop of birth, death, and rebirth, by reaching an enlightenment or nirvana. Nirvana is a state beyond the self, free from attachment, suffering, and most importantly, the constant churn of reincarnation. So where does that leave Wukong? His quest for immortality feels torn between two worlds. On the one hand, he is chasing the Taoist ideal, transcending the celestial order, breaking free from fate, and aligning with the natural flow of the universe. But on the other hand, Wukong is still tangled up in his attachment to power and ego, things that block him from reaching the Buddhist ideal of liberation. In the game's narrative, Wukong's pursuit of immortality is fascinating because it blends elements from all three philosophical traditions: Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. On the surface, it's a literal quest. He's looking for power and freedom from death. But it's also a symbolic journey. He's chasing autonomy, or trying to take control of his destiny through cultivation. His immortality is tied directly to his rebellion against the heavenly forces. Wukong's fight to break free from these cosmic constraints is a lot like the myths of Prometheus or Sisyphus. They both struggle against the rules of the gods in an endless quest for freedom. Wukong is right there with them, constantly pushing against the system. He's always seeking immortality, but he's also held back by his desires. These desires, whether for power, fame, or control, keep him from ever really achieving the peace that true immortality would offer. It's like he's chasing freedom, but he's his own worst enemy, forever held down by what he wants. This struggle actually reminds me of Plato's chariot allegory. Imagine your soul is like a chariot. So the soul is the chariot, but it's pulled by two horses. And then there is the charioteer, the driver, who is basically your rational mind. The driver's job is to keep everything on track. Now, the two horses represent different parts of your desires. One horse, wild, full of energy, and wants to run wherever it feels like. It chases after all the fun, exciting things, even when they might not be good for you. This horse, totally Wukong, rebellious and full of fire. The other horse, much more calm, well-behaved. It listens to the charioteer and wants to go in the right direction, toward wisdom, truth, and enlightenment. The charioteer's job is to steer both of these horses in balance. If the wild horse pulls too hard, the whole chariot goes off course. But if the charioteer can keep control, the chariot soars toward the sky, toward truth and happiness. It's all about balance. Now, let's connect that to Wukong. Wukong's quest for immortality is like trying to drive his chariot, except his wild horse, his rebellious nature, keeps pulling him off course. He's constantly caught between what he wants to do and what he should do. It's a battle between chasing power and finding peace, between rebellion and enlightenment. And it's this constant struggle that keeps him from ever fully reaching his goal. Here's a thought experiment for you. Let's say you're granted immortality, but there's a catch. You will live forever, but you will lose all your emotional experiences. No more passion, no more joy, no more love. You get immortality, but it costs you your emotional self. Would you take it? Would immortality really be worth it if it meant sacrificing what makes you feel alive? That's the kind of dilemma Wukong faces. He wants the power and freedom that immortality brings, but at what cost? Alright, let's dive into the final part of the analysis, the fragmentation of the self. Wukong's rebellion comes with a price, and that price is the fragmentation of his very being. His spirit gets divided into 6 relics, each one tied to one of the 6 senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought. This mirrors the Buddhist conception of the 6 roots, which are the sources of attachment in the Buddhist cycle of reincarnation. What does this fragmentation represent? It's the cost of his defiance against heaven. By rebelling, Wukong is not only fighting the celestial powers, he's also tearing himself apart in the process. His rebellion might grant him freedom, but it also leads to the disintegration of his self. Even though Wukong is immortal, his true vulnerability still lies in the possibility of death. Immortality doesn't make him invincible. In fact, the game suggests that Wukong, unable to be defeated by external forces, ultimately chooses to end his own life, splitting his soul into 6 relics. But it doesn't end here. Erlang Shen, that powerful warrior deity we talked about earlier, secretly takes Wukong's mind relic and distributes the other 5 relics to the Yao Guai, those powerful monsters who are allied with the Celestial Court. Their mission? To overthrow Wukong, of course. Wukong's reincarnations are supposed to inherit his memories and abilities, with Erlang and 5 gatekeepers acting as judges to determine if these reincarnations are worthy of becoming the new Wukong. But here's the question. Even if these reincarnations have Wukong's memories, can they ever truly be him? It's a deep existential question. Is the destined one in the game a continuation of the original Wukong, or is it a completely new being, with his memories but without his original personality? It's kind of like asking if you have the memories of someone else, but none of their essence. Are you really them? So what does this fragmentation of the self mean in the grand scheme of things? It leaves the player pondering whether there is true continuity of self, or if Wukong's identity has been lost forever in the fragmentation of his spirit. In a way, this ties back to a fundamental philosophical debate. Is identity tied to memory or something different? Now let's come back to the six senses. In Buddhism, the six senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, are seen as gateways to attachment and suffering. They are what tie us to the material world, leading to dukkha, suffering, because they create desires and aversions that keep us trapped in the endless cycle of samsara. The only way out? To transcend these attachments and reach enlightenment. Wukong's fragmented senses in the game reflect this Buddhist principle of sensory attachment. His physical disintegration mirrors his spiritual fragmentation, caused by his uncontrolled attachment to the material world. By recovering these relics, he is symbolically striving to master his sensory experiences. It's kind of like what happens in Buddhist meditation. The goal isn't to eliminate the senses, but to observe them without attachment, to break the hold they have over you. In the same way, Wukong's journey is about regaining his wholeness, not just by collecting the relics, but by mastering his senses and freeing himself from the desires that fragment the being. There's a cool connection to the book. In Journey to the West, chapter 14, Sun Wukong kills 6 bandits. These bandits symbolize the same 6 senses, and by defeating them, he's able to reach enlightenment. Black Myth Wukong mirrors this journey. In the game, the protagonist must recover these relics to regain his wholeness, just like in the book, where defeating the bandits leads to spiritual unity. So what does the game really say about becoming Sun Wukong? It's not just about stepping into the shoes of this legendary figure. It's about achieving a state of enlightenment through mastering sensory attachment. Becoming Wukong, in this sense, means overcoming the distractions and desires tied to your own senses and finding true awareness. Wukong's transformation into stone after losing his senses symbolizes something crucial. It reflects a life without true awareness. He's become hardened, detached from the world and his experiences, like someone who has lost their connection to reality. The journey to reclaim the 6 relics isn't just about powering up, it's a metaphor for gaining spiritual freedom. In chapter 4 of the game, we are introduced to the Spider Cavern, and this place is a literal representation of what happens when you get too attached to your senses. Just like the Yao Guai trap mortals to drain their spiritual energy, the celestial deities are doing the same thing. They're leeching off these lower beings to sustain their own twisted form of immortality. The whole system is built on this cycle of exploitation, and it mirrors what's happening with Wukong and his fragmented senses. Attachment to the 6 senses keeps beings trapped in the cycle of samsara, that endless loop of suffering and ignorance. In Buddhism, the way out is true enlightenment, by transcending these attachments and breaking free from the cycle. Black Myth Wukong taps into this idea. As Wukong regains the relics, he is not just piecing himself back together, he's striving for spiritual freedom from the very cycle that keeps beings bound to suffering. Ultimately, it's not about who the protagonist is, it's about what it represents. The monkey's task is to recover Wukong's relics and directly parallels the Buddhist path to nirvana. By mastering the senses and becoming whole again, the monk is freeing himself from the cycle of suffering. Sun Wukong, then, isn't just a character, it's a state of enlightenment. It's about reaching a place where you can act without being controlled by desires or attachments. Now picture this. Imagine your mind and body are split into 6 pieces, each one representing a different sense. You've got to go out and reclaim each one, but every time you do, the sensory experience becomes more intense. The sound gets louder, the sights more vivid, the touch more overwhelming, It's like sensory overload. Your mind has to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by each new piece you collect. And so once again, Wukong is caught between two states. Does he remain fragmented to maintain balance, or does he seek wholeness, knowing that regaining his senses might overwhelm him completely? This is the final layer of his journey, the constant push and pull between becoming whole and the potential danger that comes with it. So who's the monkey? The monkey is more than just a legendary trickster. He's a being caught between two worlds, the celestial and the terrestrial. His character arc weaves together rebellion against authority, the burden of enlightenment and immortality, and the fragmentation of the self. His defiance of the celestial order, it's not just about breaking rules, it's an existential tension. Does true freedom come from rejecting external authority, or is it found in accepting your place within the cosmic order? This is one of Wukong's greatest struggles. Similarly, his resistance to fully embracing enlightenment and immortality shows us the weight that comes with transcending mortality. Can you live forever and still retain who you are? Or does immortality strip away the self that craves autonomy and freedom? Finally, Wukong's fragmented spirit, scattered across 6 relics tied to his senses, mirrors the Buddhist struggle with sensory attachment. His quest to reclaim those relics becomes a metaphor for the inner journey toward wholeness. Can Wukong master his desires and become whole again? Or will his attachments keep him divided, forever torn between illusion and reality? And the last question, what is true freedom? Is it found in eternal rebellion, constantly fighting against the forces that seek to control you? Or is freedom discovered in surrendering to a greater truth, aligning with something beyond yourself? So maybe the question isn't who's the monkey, but rather what will he become at the end of the journey? A journey between earth and heaven, reality and illusion, life and death. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and hit subscribe to join our pugnacious community of cogitantes, those who think critically, push boundaries, and always go against the grain. I would love to hear what you think about this new series. If you've got ideas, suggestions, or requests for characters you want to see featured next, drop them in the comments. While I was away, the channel grew, and that's all thanks to you and your awesome advice for making these videos better. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support. Looking ahead, after this long theoretical introduction, I'm planning to focus on the bosses in each chapter of Black Myth Wukong. But if there are any other characters you're curious about, let me know, and I'll add them to the list. I'm also going to dive into the wider Neo-Confucian soft power subtext of the game. There's a lot to unpack here, and I can't wait to discuss it all with you. Thanks again for stopping by. Happy mindful gaming, and see you next time.